This video is a sad and potentially very disturbing story. Stick around and I'll tell you more. Hey everybody, it's Brian from A Life After Layoff, and today I want to bring you a developing story about the tornadoes that recently ravaged the middle part of the country. And if you're not aware, over this past weekend, through the middle part of the country, including Missouri, Tennessee, Kentucky, and up into Illinois, there was a bunch of tornadoes that hit. In fact, this one came a little close to home, literally, because I'm in the central Tennessee area myself, and we heard all the warnings about the tornadoes that were going to be coming through, and we're told to prepare for them. Now, fortunately, where I'm located, we were spared from the brunt of it, although the wind did decide to rearrange my backyard furniture and pushed my grill across the yard. But all things considered, we were pretty fortunate. Unfortunately, a couple small towns in Kentucky took the brunt of the storm, specifically Mayfield. Now, Mayfield's a pretty small town in the southwestern part of Kentucky, and it's home to Mayfield Consumer Products, and that's the focus of today's story. This town was essentially leveled or near leveled by this tornado that ripped through. And at ground zero was a candle factory. And if you're not familiar with this story, essentially this tornado destroyed or completely flattened a candle factory that was home to about 110 workers at the time the tornadoes touched down. And unfortunately, it looks like at least 8 people have lost their lives at the factory, and there's, at the time of recording this, another 8 that are still missing. And my understanding is that efforts to recover and rescue are still ongoing. So hopefully we'll get some news about survivors rather than the alternative. Obviously, this is a particularly difficult time for a lot of families that were affected. I ask that you keep those victims' families in your thoughts. You might be asking yourself, okay, there was a tornado, it's unfortunate, but why are we talking about this on a careers channel? And that's where, unfortunately, the story is taking a disturbing twist. Mayfield Consumer Products is a family-owned candle and home fragrance product maker that's based in Mayfield, namesake, that was hit hard by these tornadoes that ripped through. According to Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear, there was 110 people that were working inside at the time the tornadoes touched down. This company was founded in 1998 and it had been actively hiring for the Christmas rush. But essentially they were running a 24/7 operation, probably lots of overtime going on, and they were really requiring heavy production loads. Now I'm speaking from Middle Tennessee, but there were warning signs. We were all warned that there was a tornado watch coming through and to prepare and be able to seek shelter. This was hours before the tornadoes were coming through. So certainly the candle factory was aware of the risk of the tornadoes and the storms. And evidently there was a group of employees that was asking to leave to be able to go ride out the storms at home with their families. And allegedly the supervisors were telling them if they did leave that their jobs would be on the line. And according to this article by Dion Hampton at NBC News, for hours as word of the storm spread, as many as 15 workers beseeched managers to let them take shelter in their homes, only to have their requests rebuffed, said the workers. Apparently some people left regardless of those repercussions, and good on them, because at least 8 of their coworkers died as a result of staying in that factory, working overtime, trying to get those candles done by Christmas time. In fact, one of those employees, Michaela Emery, said in an interview out of her hospital bed that workers first asked to leave shortly after tornado sirens sounded outside of the factory. This is around 5:30 p.m. Employees started congregating inside of the bathrooms and inside hallways, which is standard protocol for extreme weather. But the real tornado actually wouldn't arrive for several more hours. So evidently after the employees decided that the immediate danger had passed, several people began asking to go home, and rightfully so. It's scary. Just imagine being in this environment where these major storms are coming in, there's damage happening outside, and you've got a young family at home, you've got small kids at the house, you've got pets, you've got other loved ones that are relying on you, and you're stuck at work. But Emery says that people questioned to say if they could leave or go home, and it looks like she actually decided to stay and work and make the extra money. But regardless, there were supervisors and team leaders that told the employees that if they left, they would be jeopardizing their job. She said she overheard managers telling 4 workers that if you leave, you're more than likely going to be fired. And she said she heard that with her own ears. So all along, there's these emergency warnings going on throughout the facility. But apparently the first wave passed and they thought that everything would be okay. And then there was evidently a 3 to 4 hour window between the first alarm and the second emergency alarms. Realistically, the employee should have been allowed to go home at that point in time. And another employee, Haley Condors, said that team leaders told her that they wouldn't let workers leave because of safety precautions, and that's why they kept everybody in the hallways and the bathrooms. But once they mistakenly thought the tornado was no longer a danger, they sent everybody back out to work. And really, at this point in time where there was this gap, employees should have been allowed to go home, get their families, and get the safety. And another employee, Elijah Johnson, was working in the back of the building when several employees decided to ask their supervisor whether or not they could leave. And he said he joined in. I said, I asked to leave and I was told that I would be fired. Even with the weather like this, you're still going to fire me, he asked. And the manager responded, yes. In fact, he said the managers went even so far as to take roll call in hopes of finding who had abandoned their jobs. Now, of course, the company officials have denied these allegations. Spokesman Bob Ferguson says absolutely untrue. Now, I guess this is a he said, she said. Now, this is my own opinion, but when you have multiple people coming forward saying that managers have told them that they were not allowed to leave the building, it gets hard to believe the company official line. And then after the second warning sounded a few hours later, that's when the tornado hit and flattened the place. And I'll be honest with you, my first reaction when I heard this story was I turned to my wife and said, why the heck was there a full factory of people working when they knew full well that these tornadoes were coming through? And this is even before I knew anything about this story. This was just when I heard that there was a workplace flattened. Actually, there was an Amazon warehouse that was also damaged severely, and there potentially was fatalities there as well. And it was I think it was in Illinois. But the same reason, that was my first reaction, is why is there still people working during these storms? Because here in Middle Tennessee, we were all well aware that there was tornadoes. So there was a tornado warning. And fortunately, we didn't see any of them touch down here, but we were warned well in advance. So that was the first thing that popped in my head. And it doesn't surprise me that a few days later, this story pops up with employees being told that they are forced to be there to hit production for the Christmas season. So as you can imagine, it's pretty devastating, especially for employees that are probably making not a whole lot more than $10 or $15 an hour. So you're essentially risking your life, not only your life, but also the lives of your family. Imagine if you had a wife and small children at home, maybe even an infant, and they were relying on you to provide them safety. Here you're at this factory trying to provide for them, all the while their lives are being destroyed. This is all alleged. However, one has to question the official narrative that's coming out of the company stating that they didn't give the instruction that people would be terminated when there's just so many people coming forward with it. So this story got me thinking about work situations that I've been in, and I know my wife has been in as well, where we potentially work in very dangerous conditions because we have bosses that are so bent on us performing at all costs. And one instance comes to mind where I had a boss that required me to work during a blizzard when I had a 40-mile commute. And the storm came in about 2 p.m. and the snow was piling up and up and up. And all the while watching these roads thinking, I'm never going to get home. And it took me probably 3.5 hours to drive home in absolutely treacherous conditions, all because a boss wanted me to show FaceTime. And unfortunately, even though I had a few close calls, I did get home safely. But I'll never forget the reason why my boss wanted me to stay there. It was because we had to show FaceTime. And similarly, my wife working as a flight attendant during polar vortex where it was negative 18 degrees out, and she was required to go to work in her normal light winter uniform. And in fact, a memo went out from corporate stating that if you wore anything other than the approved winter gear, that you would be subject to discipline. And I kid you not, that in the same email, the senior staff said that they would not be reachable until after the polar vortex because they were shutting down their offices. So getting back to the candle story, if you're in a situation where you feel unsafe at work for any reason, you have to ask yourself, is it worth risking life and limb in order to make your paycheck? Because it's very obvious that not all employers have their employees' best interest in mind. And I would suspect that this candle company is going to be dealing with some serious lawsuits. And they're saying that they want to pick up the pieces and start building production facilities again. I gotta wonder if that's even going to be a reality for them. And when you go over to Mayfield's website, it looks like they've actually pulled the website down and it is now just a statement from the CEO. And if you have the ability and you want to support the victims, there is a donation option here. And then you can also donate directly to the local police department. And I'll leave the link for that as well. So again, folks, no job is worth your safety, your life, or your limb. I appreciate you watching. Apologize about the somber nature of this video. We'll see you next time.